Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We'll give it a couple more minutes for more people to join in, especially because this is quite a quick little webinar today. So I'll be back with you in 2 minutes and then we'll get started. Alrighty. Thank you, everyone, for joining in today on this webinar on how to build a lovely poster. And I'm sure a lot of you have already done this, so it might be quite simplistic. But I think the highlight of this webinar is going to be that I've got a couple of posters to show you, and we're going to kind of dissect what's wrong with them and what's good about them and how we can make it better. Okay. Just to start off, if you have any questions midway, you can put them down in the chat. I'll be checking it every once in a while, so if I don't reply immediately, don't freak out. I haven't forgotten about you. And if the audio is a problem or the video is a problem, also put it down in the chat and I will try my best to fix it. Might be a bit shaky on this one because they've kind of changed the platform a little bit, but let's give it a shot. So let's just look at the learning objectives first before I give you a little quiz. So learn the important sections to include in a poster presentation, which will be quite obvious to everyone. That we'll go through that pretty quickly, and understand why it's important and how to optimize the different sections in the poster, because that's where people tend to go wrong, and that's why a poster can fall flat. So we're going to try not to do that today. Okay. Now we're just going to head over to a little pre-quiz, because that allows me to see how well you learn from the post-quiz. Let me just get this started really quickly and let me share screen. So you should be able to see my screen right now. And the code is up there, which I will also type in to the chat for people here. So it's giving you a link there. And the code is, there you go. And then the code's in there. Don't worry, I just saw that question. Don't worry, I will be telling you what a poster is. But let's do this quiz first. We're doing it before, so I can compare it to the results after. So once a few people join in, I'll hit start. Okay, thank you for joining. The quiz in this one is quite easy compared to previous webinars I've done. So don't be afraid. There's no winning or losing. Give it a couple of seconds for a few more of you to join in, because there's quite a few of you here today, actually. Just give it your best shot at this point. Wait for one more, just because 5's a nice number. There we go, Mr. Trade. Let's get started. So no speed. Take your time. You have 20 seconds to read the answer options and answer. Ooh, quick voting. Let's have a look at the answers. Good. Yeah, majority got it right. Perfect. And we'll talk about what an abstract is as well and what you need to do for it and why you need to do it before a poster. So moving on, 7 players. Let's get started. Again, no speed points. Just keep it going. See the not in big letters. This one's harder, isn't it? Oh wow, 6 out of 6. Excellent. This is great. So it'll be much easier today then. Alrighty, let me reshare my tab. This is where it takes a bit of time because they've changed how they do it. But all right, you should be able to see my screen right now. If you can't, pop it down in the chat, and I'm watching the chat, so don't worry. So we'll start off with why you care about posters. And it's because you need to present one at some point or the other in your medical career, whether you're doing research, whether you want it for the specialty application points. And like the participant asked in the chat what a poster is, I think it's in here. Yeah, what is a poster? There you go. It's a visual presentation of the most important findings of a piece of work to an audience. And this is different to a talk, because a talk you can go through slides, you can have animations and videos, whereas a poster is just a piece of paper, essentially. Not A4, it's a massive piece of paper, which you print out. You normally design it on PowerPoint, and you print it out, and it would contain the most salient pieces of information from your work. And we'll talk about how important it is to pick the right information. And so it's usually in a large hall or a meeting room with other people who have posters as well, and you're all presenting at the same time, which is why it can be a bit nerve-wracking, because there's talented people around you presenting their work as well. And the audience will move around and ask you questions as you stand there and try to answer them. They're also presented at conferences, and people see each poster for quite a short duration because they move around quite a lot. So it must be gripping. You have to be able to stand out in that 2-3 minutes so that people remember it later. And how do we do that? Well, we're going to find out today, I hope. So, abstract. Why did we talk about abstracts in the question? Because to get your poster selected for a conference, you need to first submit an abstract. They read through the abstract, see whether it's appropriate for that particular conference, and they judge the quality and merit of the work, and then they'll decide whether they want to give you a poster presentation or not. So an abstract, the sections of an abstract, we're going to go through this quickly because this is not a webinar to do with abstracts, but it's essentially the same as you'll see as the sections in a poster. It's the introduction, which should only contain background information required to understand what you've written in the abstract. It doesn't need to contain all the background information for the entire project you've done, because an abstract is tiny. It's about 250 to 300 words. You cannot fit an entire piece of research or a quip or an audit into that amount of space. You have to focus on the most important result you found in your work and introduce that. But it should include aims and objectives, just to give it a clear structure and guide to where it's going. Methods, again, only methods for what you did, what you're going to talk about in the abstract and future poster. And you don't need extreme amounts of detail there. You just need enough for the reader to understand what you've done and how you've done it, especially if you've done something quite unusual. And then the results section here, again, the most critical results from your work. Don't delve into the tiny little details that are interesting to you, but they might not be interesting to the larger audience. And then finally, the discussion and conclusion, which should highlight the impact of the work in the future and a few of the limitations there. The most important section here, I would say, is the results and discussion. Okay, and we'll see in the poster what's the most important section as well. So you have a good guideline now about what an abstract is and how to kind of work it up from a larger project and percolate it down into a smaller little summary called the abstract. And then you submit it and wait and hope for the best. So what are the sections of a poster? So I'm going to explain the slide because we're going to be carrying on with this format. On the right, you will see an example poster. I hope you can see it because posters tend to be quite big and long, that it's hard to kind of fit it on a PowerPoint slide, but we're trying. So have a look. Comment while we're on this particular slide, comment in the chat what you think is wrong with the slide. And then after I go through the slide, we'll talk about the points in the chat. So I've obtained this from a colleague of mine, and it's a project they did, a quip, and they wanted to do a poster on it. And this was their first draft. So savage it, honestly. Say what's good, say what's bad. I'm going to talk about that as well, so don't be afraid. But I'm using this to highlight the sections of a poster to start with. As you'll notice, they're the same as the sections in an abstract, and they should mirror what you've written in your abstract and submitted to the conference for judging. If it doesn't, they might get a bit weird about it, so don't try to trick them or anything like that. But again, in this part, I would say the results are the most important section, because that's where most of your diagrams will be, and that's what makes a poster visual and interesting to look at. So hopefully that gave you some hints about what's wrong with this poster, this draft of this poster, I should say. And all the same other rules apply for the different sections. Only introduce material you will discuss or talk about in your poster. Only give the methods for what you've done in the poster. Only discuss very briefly the reason you did the work, and not the reason you did the work, actually, the impact your work will have on the field or in the future. And this should also have references. The poster should have references, but in a tiny font at the bottom, which it's been cut off slightly in this example here, but it should definitely have it, but in a much tinier font, so it doesn't occupy that much space, because you need all the space you can get here. So I'm going to look at the chat right now. So comment whatever you think is wrong or great about this poster. Okay, I'll give it a couple of minutes, because there's a question, but it's not to do with this slide. I will answer that question before I move on, but I'm just going to wait for other people to comment about the poster right now that's on this slide. So don't be shy. There's no wrong answers here. Thank you, Alejandra. We're getting there. Very text heavy. You are indeed correct. Sonia, thank you. Exactly. Too much text. So you guys are getting it. Visuals are quite important, and because no one's going to read that much text. Figures are too small. Good. Yeah. Perfect. Because we mentioned a bit of visual before, but if no one can see your images, what's the point of having them there? Exactly. Perfect. Good. Okay. I'm going to answer the previous question first. So, Emma, to do a poster, you do not need to have written a paper like a literature review and then do a poster based on it. So, for that specific example, for literature review, I guess you would have had to have done the review to be able to have the information to do the poster. You're right, but you don't have to have it published. You have to do the body of work first. The body of work doesn't need to be published to be able to do a poster. That's kind of what I meant from that. I hope that helped. Alejandro also said no graphs, so difficult to see the result. Yes, I was just going to mention that. They hadn't put their graphs in yet, so I don't think we can blame them, because I saw this draft quite early. Okay, so again, don't forget, if you have any questions, keep putting them in the chat, but for now we're going to move on. And what you're going to see is a gradual improvement in the poster based on what we've talked about. So the main things we've mentioned so far are text heavy, images are too small. So let's see what the authors did to improve upon that. Improvements. Ooh, sorry, we skipped a little bit. Okay. Type in what improvements you see and whether they're enough and what the problems are now. So I've highlighted some of the improvements there, but please feel free to put down your own. There are better diagrams. The graphs are in. And that other diagram in the methods section is... In the previous slide, there were a lot of tiny diagrams. Now there's only one tiny diagram, and it's not overlaid with itself. You still can't read it, even if it was printed out to real size. So I guess that's space for more improvement, but it's definitely better than before. And in terms of text, I think it is cut down slightly, or at least they've tried to bullet point now, which I'm going to highlight over and over and over again. Bullet points are your best friend for posters and oral talks, which will be in my next webinar. But it just makes things bite-sized and easier to digest as you read, especially when you're reading 20 posters in a single day. Okay, I'm going to wait on the chat again, but I won't wait too long this time because it's not that big a difference. And I guess it'll be quite similar comments right now. But thank you guys for being engaging and keep it up. Agree with your comments. Thank you, Alejandro. And to answer your question, Emma, yes, it does involve doing some research on the topic, then writing it in the form, and then instead of writing in the form of a paper, you're doing it in the form of a poster. Yes, but that doesn't mean you can't also submit it as a poster or as an oral talk. So it shouldn't limit you in any way, unless the conference has a specific rule on that, or the journal you're trying to submit the relevant paper to has a specific rule on that. For example, you might need to disclose that it's been presented at this conference in this year. Okay, so we're seeing improvements. We're seeing better quality diagrams and bullet pointing. So what happens in draft 3? More diagrams, yay. I'm going to say nothing. I'll talk about methods diagrams later, but please comment on what you think was improved. I'll give you time for this one because I've said nothing now. Think about how you'd feel if you saw that poster live at a conference. Definitely less text, yes, indeed. And that makes it more pleasant. More bullet points, yep, perfect, good. Larger diagram, easy to understand and read. More diagrams, some bullet points, exactly. Again, I'm going to keep highlighting how important diagrams are. People don't remember text. When you're looking at a poster in real life, your inner dialogue is reading the text out loud to yourself. You don't remember that as well as you remember a picture you've seen in front of you. Most posters you go to will have diagrams for results. There'll be complicated diagrams, which is a negative as well there. I'll talk about that in a second. But they don't usually have too many diagrams for methods unless this person is pretty good at doing posters. And I have seen some of those, but the majority, no. Methods tend to be complicated. So having a diagram or a flow chart in about what you've done makes it so much easier to work out how you got to the end goal from the start. And that makes it easier to understand your results and even replicate it if they want to. So I would definitely recommend methods diagrams. Something in the chat. Let me have a look. Easier to follow, exactly. And it kind of almost, because of the arrows, gives a natural flow to the poster, which is really important. Flow and structure are things that make it easier for us to compartmentalize information and remember it and recall it. So it's essential to give that to the reader. Sarah, the theme background is pretty plain, but I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. We'll actually talk about theme and aesthetics pretty soon, so good job for picking up on that. I will talk about whether plain is good or bad. Exactly that, actually. But coming back to diagrams really quickly. More diagrams are better, and use diagrams whenever it's appropriate to do so. For example, don't put diagrams in the introduction usually, because it's not going to add that much additional information compared to text, because it's not something that can be converted into a graphic that encapsulates the same amount of information. Use a diagram when it conveys more information in a better way than the text would. Okay, keep that in mind. It's quite important. It can't just be having a poster with only diagrams in it. Doesn't work. And make sure the quality of the diagrams are good. They shouldn't be too complicated. When you look at it immediately, you should be able to, in the first 3 to 4 seconds, work out what's going on in the diagram, which is why I said some posters tend to have very complicated graphs with many different trend lines, many different statistics on them. No, posters should be specific and focus on a couple or 3 results at the maximum. Or if you have multiple lines, highlight the most important trend in a certain color and gray out the other trends. They can be there, and if the person is interested in them, they can look at them, but very clearly show them which is the main trend line you want them to remember or to come across. It's quite graying things out is quite a useful tool in making figures in posters and oral presentations to kind of spotlight what you're trying to show. Yeah, okay. That's pretty good diagrams. A negative I would say here is that they've used Excel very clearly to draw their diagrams, and the color trends. The color patterns are not good for colorblind people. Try to use blues and oranges or any other colorblind friendly palette because you don't know your audience. And yeah, it's better to be inclusive there. And don't make your graphs in Excel, please. Use a professional program like GraphPad Prism. Makes better graphs, better statistics. Yeah, and that's it. Quality over quantity and quantity over text. That's the summary from the diagram section, I would say. So moving on. Oh, and now we're just going to talk about aesthetic and text. I think this was very close to the final draft, which is why we might not have any other drafts in there. I don't know if I put one side by side from start to finish, which I should have in hindsight. But yeah, so now I think Sarah was talking about the background, and we're going to talk about that now. The aesthetic is super important. In any visual work, color scheme and theme are extremely important to get not only your point across, but to make it pleasing to the reader or the audience to kind of accept the information. So I would recommend keeping the background quite plain and neutral, but headings and diagrams, for example, should have a very specific color palette. I wasn't able to show the logo in the top in the title area for this poster, but you can see that the title is in a blue background. The background is blue and the title is in white. And then the image on the left of the title is all in white, and that clashes. You shouldn't have different colors layered on top of each other. Please don't do that. It's just dissonant for the eyes. Keep everything harmonized. If you're using blues and oranges, stick to blues and oranges throughout. Don't have graphs in green or diagrams with pink in them. Like one of my teachers said in the past, I don't want to need sunglasses to look at your poster. So keep it simple, and have a color palette in design terms, I guess we could say. Makes it pleasant to the eye. More people will remember it for being just for aesthetics and theme, and that'll help them remember your work as well. And remember you. It's all about reputation at the end of the day, I guess. And text. There's still lots of text and paragraphs, very clear, but there's also a clear improvement, and the use of bullet pointing is very good. So this might still be a negative here. I would still try to cut it down further, especially in the methods section there, because it's very unlikely people are going to try and reproduce this just from a poster, because you can't get enough across in the methods anyways. So there's no point of putting that extra text there, especially since you have a diagram. People can ask you that. You kind of guide what questions they come up with in that way as well. You control the narrative. But sometimes you'll have no choice. You'll have to have text in there. So don't be afraid. You don't have to cut the text out completely. You will have to have some text there. But I think this was the final draft, and it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Definitely could be improved, but pretty good. Ooh, so we're going to the next one. A good example. Great. So, well, I've given you the answers there, actually. But type in the chat anyways to tell me what you think should be improved, what might not be good in this poster, and what is good in this poster. And if you recognize the color theme, you can get bonus points for that if you say it in the chat. I'll give it a couple of minutes. I'm looking at the chat right now. So don't be afraid. Just post in what you think is good and what you think is bad about this poster. Would you be happy if this was your poster at a conference? Let's see. Everything in bullet points, so it seems easy to follow. Thank you. Conclusions could be aligned better instead of center, but looks good overall. I see what you mean, and we definitely did try that. And well, maybe I should have had an example where they were aligned to the left or to the right. But again, that's a good point as well. I like the color schemes. Thank you. And then there's one that says poor choice of color theme. Thank you for that, for your honesty as well. In this one, actually, it had to be this color theme because for the particular university it was, because it matched their logo and things. So the greens are a bit weird, but the important thing is consistency there, where the donut charts are the same theme, the timeline is in the same theme, the grays are maintained through the diagrams. Like Alejandro said, exactly, quite a consistent layout. That's the point. Bullet points are impressive. Thank you. It's just easier when you have 4 and you know you need to know 4. It makes it easier for the speaker as well. You don't have a mass of information, and when you forget something, you can always glance back and kind of know which bullet point you're looking for and extract that information very quickly. And yeah, we tried to keep. Well, I guess this. I was involved in this poster, but sometimes, of course, not all the. There were quite a few other people, 4 or 5 other people involved in this poster as well. So your decisions might not always be the final say. But that's, I guess, another important thing to learn about making posters and presentations is teamwork is important. You have to compromise in some places. Font size looks a little small. I don't remember what it was actually. But again, yeah, in full size, it probably wouldn't be too small. Hopefully. It might have been, and then we'd have to change it. But I guess that brings up an important point. Change is not always a bad thing. Figuring out something's wrong means you can make it right. Okay, let's move on. Oh, I guess we're at the summary then. So to summarize, keep the look of the poster aesthetic and clean. Clean and consistent. That's what I would say. Clean and consistent. You can use pre-made templates to start off with for practice. And so it comes with a color palette and places to put your results and things. But those often have lots of text boxes, so be aware of that and know to delete the text boxes and replace them with images when it's appropriate to do so. Use a font that's easy to read and print, like Arial. Don't use Times New Roman or any funky curly fonts there. It's just not fun to read. Less is more, like it's probably come across through the examples. Less text, more images. Focus on the most important points. That's number 3, I guess. Only include the most key findings. And a diagram is worth 1,000 words. A quality diagram replacing appropriate text. Okay, excellent. So if you have any questions, actually before the questions, we'll do the post-webinar quiz. So just give me 2 seconds to share that screen. Let me just open it up here. Okay, you should be able to see my screen right now, and I'm gonna put the voting link in the chat as well. Sarah, I will get back to your question in a second. Let's do the quiz first. I promise that question is not in the quiz. Alrighty, I've also put the code in the chat and the link, so go ahead, easy peasy. Only 2 questions. It's not that stressful today. Well, it might be. I don't know. Okay, 5 people, 6 people. Excellent. Let's get started. 8 people. Wow, we have a party here today. Alrighty. Oh, no, we skipped a question. Sorry. Go back to question 1. No speed points, so take your time. Oh, we're starting you off easy today. Think about it. I've actually mentioned this multiple times over the course of this presentation, so hopefully it's come across. Thank you for the person who's giving me thumbs up. Well, the majority of you got it right. So the reason it's not always in the methods and results section is because sometimes you can't put the words in the methods section into images. You just won't find the correct images to do it, and then you end up with bullet points. And sometimes results sections need tables where you can't use diagrams there. And when there's too much text, generally yes, but like I said, not all text can be an image, like introductions, for example. I was going to mention something else to you guys. Let's carry on. It'll come back to me. Next question. 13 players. You're making me happy, guys. Again, no speed points. Which section of the poster is the most crucial? Let's see. Good work, everyone. Yeah, results is the most useful section because, well, you can't have a discussion without the results, and the discussion is quite tiny in a poster. Actually, you just want a couple of points there. An introduction, no, because it is important, but with you, it's not as important as the results because the results are the point you're trying to get across, whereas the introduction is the kind of context. You could technically just provide the results to get across your point, but you can't just provide the introduction to get across your point. Okay, let's get back to it. Just a couple more things to go through for you guys, and then we are done. I promise. Okay. That question, Sarah. I have to get back to you. Ooh. So, Sarah, first, what was the graph software you mentioned earlier? Let me type it in the chat so you can have it down. GraphPad Prism. And I think the latest version is 10. They had an update like yesterday. So, well, it'll download the most updated version for you anyways. And then next one, Upamanyu. What software do you use to make posters usually? I use PowerPoint. But you can use Canva as well. Canva is really good. I will come to your question in a second, Fu. One other piece of software that's really, really useful for making diagrams is called BioRender. And they have a free version, which is really good. I use that in my thesis, so I would definitely recommend it. Top publication quality diagrams. Put that in the chat as well. Okay, do you have any specific advice for posters for wet lab research? No. This is all coming from experience, mostly to do with wet lab research. Follow the same rules and you'll get there. You might have more technical graphs, but try to spotlight your most important features in the graph. You might also have more technical methods. In all the posters I've done for wet lab research, I converted them into diagrams, which I think is much more friendly to people because when you have complicated equipment or multiple step protocols, it's easier to simplify them down into a flowchart. If you have any more questions, keep putting them in the chat. I'm not going anywhere, but I will leave open the screen for feedback. That's how you get your certificate. So scan in the QR code and join up on our next webinar where you'll learn about how to create an oral talk. It's similar to this, but there are some key differences which you want to know about. I'll also put the link for feedback in the chat because that is helpful sometimes. And I'll be here for a few more minutes, so just ask me questions. And I'll also put the link for the next webinar. There you go, just in case you're on your phone and can't scan a QR code right now. Keep posting in questions, any problems, and do give the feedback and join the next webinar because certificate and more information. And again, I will be going through an actual oral talk that I gave at a conference, which will hopefully be quite helpful because I don't know if you guys found it helpful, but I think having the example posters in this was quite useful. So, yeah. You're welcome, Sarah. You're welcome. I'll leave this on here for a few more minutes. And if you do have any questions after the webinar, what you can do is I'll put my email on here. You're welcome, guys. Yeah, so that's my email. You can contact me on that, and I'm pretty quick at replying, so I'll get back to you pretty instantly. And this will be on catch up, so you'll be able to catch this on Meadow and YouTube later, probably tomorrow. Yeah, and I hope that was helpful. You're welcome, Alejandro. Right, I'll wait till there's less than 10 people, and then I will leave. You guys have till then to ask me a few more questions. Oh, and another thing you'd use my email for actually is if you're making a poster, you can always send me an example, and I can give you some comments on it if you want something like that. We're going to try to set up a little mentoring service from Mind the Bleep, helping you do exactly that. So we can have a little pilot if you want to do that. And we will be hosting a conference next year, hopefully, to present posters. So you'll all have the opportunity to submit for that. And I would know if you've come here. So I guess you get a bit of a perk of me knowing you. You're welcome, guys. You're welcome. Alrighty, I'm gonna head off now. Any last questions from you guys? Sorry if it was very obvious to a lot of you. I'm sure a lot of you knew all of this stuff before, but just making it clear how important design is to making your poster actually good. Alrighty, if there's no more questions, have a great night, guys, and a great week, and I will see you for the next webinar. I hope you do join.